Okay, good evening, everybody. It's about 8:35 on the 28th of July, and we are in our final session in the Israel and Middle East Summer Discussion Series. The film that was featured, I should say the series that was featured tonight was Fauda. We decided to focus in on a limited number of episodes. I decided rather arbitrarily, season 3, episodes 1, 2, and 3. I will have to admit that due to all sorts of reasons, I have not seen the entire series. It's okay. Spoilers are fine. Don't worry about it at all. I suspect, based on what people have told me, that some folks will find this very different from most of the films that I have looked at. This is based on my choice, which have not been what Israelis sometimes called action. They've been more romantic or comedy or things like that. There have not been a lot of bombs going off, or the bombs were part of a comedy in one scene in Maktub, as opposed to a terror event and knifings or bombings or explosions, multiple per episode in Fauda. I do want to spend a moment. Barbara, what?
It doesn't stop.
Right, I'm saying nonstop. I am going to make a time now, although we're going to leave some time at the end to do the type of thing that's important both at the university and for one or more of the sponsors of the Hebrew Chorale, which has been kind enough to feature this series. So we're going to do a little bit of assessment and whatnot. But I'm going to ask Carol to start now and talk about the series that she's organizing that's beginning on August 17th. Carol, can you talk a little bit about A Taste of Jewish Music, Tel Aviv?
I will talk about it in about 1 minute since I have food in my mouth.
Okay, very good. So Carol will talk about a series right now that's being organized by the Colorado Hebrew Chorale. At the end of our discussion, I'm going to do a couple of links. I'm also going to actually, you know what, we should do the chat now. One of the things that I read in terms of what I should be doing in my class, everybody should sign in by doing something in the chat, saying good evening, everybody, or hello, or whatever. Just sign in so I have a record and that you have some individual participation. Okay, so put whatever you want. And let's see, Jessica, welcome. I don't have your direct email, so I'm going to ask you either to put your email in the chat or to send it to me.
Absolutely, we'll do so.
Okay? I mean, I know how to reach you. Someone in your family is always very good about getting a message to you if I ask her to. There you go. Okay, Carol, are you ready to talk about the Tel Aviv?
Yes, I am. The Colorado Hebrew Chorale is launching a new series, a monthly series. I wish I could say it would be very predictable, the second or the third Monday of every month. It's not quite that organized, but it is called the following: L'chaim, A Taste of Jewish Music from Anywhere. And so here is where the Anywheres are on August 17th. These are all Mondays. Monday evening, August 17th, 7:30 Mountain Time. It'll be a L'chaim with the music of Tel Aviv. On September 14th, also a Monday, it will be with the music of Morocco with a little bit of a Rosh Hashanah twist. And on Monday, the 5th of October, 7:30, will be A Taste of Jewish Music from India. And together with the music. You don't have to have a background in music. There will be song sheets available, but each of these individuals are in their own right really at the top of their game in terms of being the presenters of this material. Cantor Janet Eileen Roth from Summit, New Jersey is doing Tel Aviv. Vanessa Paloma, who is an academic currently based at Cambridge in England, will be doing Morocco, and she has lived in Morocco for many years, extensive experience. And the final one for Cholamoid Sukkot, October 5th, will be Rachel Matzliach, who herself was born in Calcutta and really is the world's foremost authority on Jewish music and Jews of India. So all of these programs will be free, and we hope we will see you there. There's already information and registration at the Colorado Hebrew Chorale website, which is Colorado Hebrew Chorale.org, or for those of you who needed a drink remembrance, it's Hebrew and Chorale as in CHORALE.org. Part of the food concept, we already have the menu, and you should make it up in advance so you can have a l'chaim and enjoy a nash with us, but it'll be the Israeli the Israeli food known as sabich, which is like an eggplant in a pita and then some. And there's also suggestions about beverages, etc. So looking forward to seeing everybody then. And if you need more info, you can go to info@coloradohebrewchorale.org. And now I'm going to finish eating dinner.
Okay, and I'm sharing the screen so you can see the material, and you can click to register, and you'll have a great time. Okay, I'm also going to make a pitch for funding and for feedback in a couple moments, but let's stop with the introductions and get to the discussions. There's a little feedback from somebody. I'm sorry I muted some people because there was feedback going on. It's less now. Who would like to start off our discussion in general or specific about Fauda?
Okay, I won't be shy. I actually have only seen part of the first series and then the first episode of this third series. I find it very brutal. I find it very rough. I know that they have come from the Duftanim, that they've come from this, element of undercover work where they go into the West Bank, and they say
Barb, why don't you talk a little bit about what the Duftanim are and translate the Hebrew for those people who are not as Hebraic, those people who are Hebraically challenged.
Okay, Duftanim means cherries, actually. I don't know enough about the structure of the IDF, in terms of its secret type of units, but it's an undercover type of unit that has Arabic-speaking Israelis in it who infiltrate into the West Bank and into potential terrorist sites, if I'm getting it right, to basically get rid of to avoid plots, to try to foil known plots that will be done against Israel, and to pick off the top leaders who are fomenting these plots. From what I understand, this third one, or part of it, is supposed to be taking place in Gaza, but the Israelis were not allowed to go into Gaza to film it, whereas the ones in the West Bank, I think they did it. Did they do it in the West Bank, or did they do it in an Israeli village?
No.
it takes place in the West Bank, and one of the things is that the Hamas leader has been able to infiltrate, a whole team from Hamas has been able to infiltrate from Gaza into the West Bank. And so that's
Right.
part of the third season.
Yeah, but they supposedly later on in the series, they actually have places that are supposed to be in Gaza. And from what I understand, they filmed it partly in an Israel, Gaza's right at the beach, right at the ocean. So they filmed it. There's an Israeli town, and I never remember how to pronounce it, Jisr al-Zarqa or something like
Oh,
that.
Jisr al-Zarqa is on the road to Haifa.
It's on Haifa. It's on Route 2 for those of you who know the roads in Israel. It is just south of Haifa. And it is an Israeli Arab village, but they got permission to film some of the scenes, but the scenes are still not looking quite like Gaza. It looks more like an Israeli Arab city. So the army apparently has a unit that they construct to make it look like Gaza. So when their units train for infiltrating, in reality, they have sites that look like it. So they were able to negotiate with the army to be able to use this mock village and, have extras to be the citizens of this village to film the scenes that are supposed to be in Gaza itself, but it's not really filmed in Gaza. But the West Bank scenes, I know some of them were in Kfar Qasim, which is an Israeli village on the Israeli side of the Green Line, in Israel proper, as an Arab village.
Kfar Qasim is a very important place historically. Charlene, did they take you to Kfar Qasim when you went to Israel with the SIIS?
No, we did go to Bethlehem.
Oh, wow, that's good.
Gush Etzion and to Tekoa, and I'm gonna mute my mic here in a minute because my dog's gonna start barking. Well, maybe he's okay. Shake it. Okay. Anyway, so no, those are the places I went in Israel with SIS.
The only reason I ask is because I was taken to Kfar Qasim because one of the lead faculty was interested in the history of Kfar Qasim. It was a location of a very unfortunate, mistaken curfew violation that led to a 50-some-odd residents being slaughtered, and an apology by Reuven Rivlin, by the president of Israel, an apology by the prime minister a couple of years back. So it's an important location. I think when we went there back in 2008.
It was in 1956, apparently.
Right. And I think if you have the Wikipedia open, it should tell you when the apologies were made. But I think when I was there in 2008, they had not yet apologized. There's a museum there. There are a couple of memorials and so on. It's an interesting place. I have to say, I have not taken my students there. What?
I have to tell you something that I don't know if he's the mayor or the head of the town council right now happens to be Jewish, who is working as the head of that town. It is the town has been developed as a high-tech center, and in the Arab community, one of the complaints that the Arab population, Arab communities within Israel, the citizens of Israel, complain that they don't get enough of the education, they don't get the benefits of the high-tech thing. So this was set up sort of as a model city for developing high-tech, and my son-in-law works for a nonprofit in Nazareth that is like the project manager for some of these outreach programs, and Kfar Qasim is like one of their ideal locations now because they have been very successful in bringing their young people into higher education and into the high-tech field, which in Israel is where the money is. So they're doing very well, but his original boss for this NGO is now, he's either the top honcho in the city working with the town council or one of the leaders of the town council. And they know
you could say,
and it works.
And if you saw the entire series, you can say you saw some of Kfar Qasim and Fauda as the city in which it was filmed. Anybody else want to talk a little bit about it? Was it too violent for you? Was it too calm? Did you find it realistic? Zainab actually asked a question which I'd like you to think about. Is it pro-Palestinian? Is it pro-Israeli? Is it realistic? Is it too romantic? Is it whatever? That's not all that's not exactly how she phrased it, but we had a little bit of a discussion about exactly what to make of it. What do you guys think?
I would love to talk about that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Shimon, speak up, please.
Okay. So I have the advantage of having binge watched all the way through the end of the season, which I think is really important to understand that segment, because it starts off with this boxer who's being coached by one of the Israeli operatives, who's the Doron, and they develop a real relationship of fondness. And the Israeli and the Palestinian boxer is a simpleton. He's naive and he's sweet as can be, and he's totally apolitical. And his father is released from an Israeli prison after 20 years, and his father's a really good man too, but was a terrorist in his day. And then in the course of trying to get at some of these Hamas commandos that had infiltrated into Israel and heading to trying to get into the West Bank, they end up in a difficult situation, because these situations always compound themselves. The violence leads to violence, and people who are not caught up end up getting caught up in the violence, and people who have no interest in the politics end up getting caught up in the politics. And by the time it's over, at the end of this thing, the father of the young boxer is dead, killed by his coach, Doron, and not on purpose. He really was defending himself, but they become, this what was a love relationship becomes a hate relationship. And there are two young Israeli hikers in Wadi Kelt who are kidnapped by the father and the son, who have fled the West Bank, and they try to go to, and they bring these two successfully into Gaza as hostages. And so the Israelis are eager to get them out, and they send this commando team into Gaza, and the folks there are just wanting to make a prisoner exchange. But what ends up happening is that it leads to total deterioration of everything. In other words, the Israelis are killed, and they're heartbroken. The Israeli commando team, and then one of the Israeli hostages is killed. The other one, they almost rescue her, and the young boxer thwarts it, and he says, "No, we're not going to let them take you. This is not the way you're supposed to leave here. You're supposed to leave here by negotiation in a prisoner exchange." And then they successfully get her out through violence and into Israel. And the young boxer infiltrates Israel, and he gets into the home and he kills her.
He kills her, I know.
So it's like, the whole, and then he becomes, in the end, it ends with him obviously becoming the chief new terrorist mind who is running everything. And so you see this whole idea that the efforts are fruitless, that everything they're trying to do just ends up in destruction, and their actual goals are not achieved. It just compounds the terrorism, it compounds the death and the destruction, and you definitely get at least a sense, I don't know whether it's pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli, but you definitely get a sense from the Israeli perspective that approach is a senseless and an approach that's doomed to being fruitless in the end.
Yep.
See lots of people agreeing with you. Does anybody want to say anything else, either in support or against? I see Donna.
Yeah, it was, I saw it too from the, bits and pieces, but mainly the end parts. And I thought after all of that, and she dies, it was sort of like it was so fruitless for all of that work between them. But it was very interesting to me about the lifestyles between the two groups and what they did in their homes. I thought that was interesting.
I read some of the reviews about it and about the series in general, and they feel one of the things that makes this a special series rather than just, cops and robbers kind of thing is the fact that you do have the family scenes. You do have, it humanizes both sides.
Mhm.
And you have these people who are really can be very bad on both sides, and yet can be very sweet to their families, care about their children, have issues with their kids so that our kids aren't following in their footsteps. The very real things that parents deal with. The other one, I read one review that felt that it was much too pro-Israel and that it was not really expressing what's going on in the West Bank as far as the Palestinians. But most of the reviews feel it's pretty even-handed, and supposedly, at least the Israeli Arabs are enjoying the series. It's very popular in the Jewish Israeli sector, and supposedly the Arab sector as well. I don't know about the West Bank, that
I
it's
was
even shown
wondering
there.
about that, and also how popular it is in the Arab world.
Beyond Israel.
Yes.
And why do you think that?
I don't know that. I'm wondering, but I have a feeling it probably is, for the very reasons you mentioned, the humanization.
I felt that it was very even-handed, and that it presented the Palestinian culture in a good way, and it showed their dilemma with the terrorist element and so on. I thought that was very interesting and educational, and it felt even-handed to me. But I have to say that I watched 4 episodes of the first season and then 4 episodes of the third season, and I developed a real dislike for Doron. I don't want to see him ever again, and so I think in terms of the show showing his problems, it kind of it was more sympathetic to the Israeli side in that sense, from a humanitarian standpoint, from showing his humanity. So
it was sort of funny to see the same actor in the kindergarten, the kindergarten teacher as the father, and they sort of nebbishy,
Charlotte, you have something to say?
Yeah, I was, well, just to sort of link to what Wendy is saying, I made a note in the third season, the first episode, where Doron says his wife tells people, specifically social workers, that he's a violent person. And I thought, it seemed to me this series raises really important humanist questions about doing violent things and being a violent person. That, these are really troubling. This is a very troubling question to ask. Is he a violent person? He definitely does violent things. And I too agree with others about the violence. For me, there's just, and I think it sounds like for others, it feels, you can feel the violence when you're watching it. And I felt to myself as I was watching it in preparation for this discussion, that you can just feel and you can hear the ripping of the social fabric. And you just wonder if, how many tears can the social fabric sustain before a concept of the good community is just impossible. That there's too much cynicism, that there's too much trauma to be repaired. So I haven't got answers, but I'm throwing those out for thoughts.
Of course, literature is such that it doesn't necessarily give us answers, but it does elucidate the questions that we want to deal with. And this is fiction. I'll talk a little bit about who Lior Raz, the person, is and who Avi Zakharov, the person, is, the creators of the series. Morgan, were you trying to get a word in?
Yeah, it might have been a person or two ago, but I wanted to agree with Wendy. I think in a lot of ways the two sides were represented very well. I watched the first 3 episodes of the 3rd season, and then the first episode of the 1st season. I want to go back and like start from the beginning now. But through the first 3 episodes of the 3rd season, I read the series as very pro-Israeli, but going back to the first episode of the 1st season, I think they did an even better job in the wedding, showing the emotion that happened as the massacre was happening. And I think there was honestly more like sympathy evoked for the opposite party. So I think that they did a really nice job as a series of showing the struggles of both sides. That being said, from a videography standpoint, I think it leans more pro-Israeli. I tried to translate it into English, both the subtitles and the audio, because Netflix lets you do that. And the subtitles throughout were all done fairly well in English. There were like a couple sentences that like didn't get translated, I think because they went too quickly or something like that. But I noticed the only scenes where the audio is translated into English were the scenes with Doron and the Israeli Special Forces. It's only those scenes like in the offices or with like exclusively the Israeli Special Forces that are translated into English. And I wasn't sure if that was supposed to have any special meaning, but no scenes with like the Arab Palestinians had like English content in them, which I found interesting.
He speaks in English. Very often the Israelis are speaking in English. You know.
Oh, is that what it is?
I'm sure in reality they're speaking in Hebrew to each other, but it's being portrayed of them speaking in English to each other, at least as I see it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I went like on my like Netflix account. It lets me like it says like translate the audio into English. So I assumed I had changed it into that, but maybe I wasn't.
No, they usually speak English to each other. I haven't heard much Hebrew in it at all. You know.
Oh, okay.
So, Morgan, what you're saying is that you set up Netflix so that it would be, as it were, dubbed in English.
Yes.
Right. And you heard that the Israelis are speaking English in the Netflix dub, but the Netflix dub is not having the Arabic speaking in English. That's
Yes.
in Arabic with subtitles.
Yes.
So that at least gives you an advantage. This, I'm hoping, will change soon, although the latest announcement from the University of Wyoming is calling this into question. But as someone who doesn't really know much Hebrew or Arabic, at least you know what's Hebrew and what's Arabic from the subtitles, from how it's doing it, which is an advantage. Unfortunately, Morgan, it's not 100% clear. I told you before that the Hebrew class is not going to be canceled. That may or may not happen, but well, yeah, we'll deal. And I have your back, so we'll figure out what to do with it.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to talk about either language or anything else? Respond to anybody, things that people have said?
Oh, another thing that was kind of called to mind earlier, somebody was talking about how the circle of violence just continues no matter what we try to do, no matter who foils whose plan. And it kind of reminded me of the myth of Sisyphus, where he just keeps rolling the rock up the hill, but regardless of how many times he tries, it just ends up right back down at the bottom. No matter who side you're on, the cycle never really seems to break, as shown by Bashar as well.
I think there's another thing is that for people who are really not 100% familiar with the way life is, either in Israel or in Palestine, on the West Bank, the vision is just the violence, and you're not seeing very much of normal life. You're getting glimpses of family life. You're getting glimpses of I'd like to say normalcy, but is that giving outsiders a false impression. I mean, my daughter lives in Israel, and our in-laws who are not Jewish and have never been there are terrified to go there because all they see is images of violence. And they cannot understand how their grandchildren are growing up, basically normal, happy, healthy children and going to school and doing what kids do. And it just doesn't click because all they keep seeing on the media especially are these violent scenes or Israeli soldiers, shooting at or throwing, or holding down an Arab child or some kind of, horrible scene of a massacre. That's the image that they portray. So I don't know, I'm just curious how you all feel about that.
Shimon wants to respond.
One of the things that I'd like to bring up is that I noticed that is a difference between the two sides portrayed in the series. That in the Israeli,
Closer to your microphone.
On the Israel, can you hear me now?
A little bit better.
Let me put on a.
That's better. That's better.
Yeah. And the Israeli side, you see issues of personality conflict, mostly. And in the Palestinian side, you see issues of factional conflict, political conflict, far more. And maybe that's just a factor of Palestinian society being, having different political factions running it, Hamas in one place and the Palestinian Authority in another, and then this ISIS thing comes up. But an Israeli society, even though there are lots of factions, there's still an elected government and that people respect, and so I don't know, more or less.
I don't know how many people respect the government right now.
Yeah.
All right. But that was the difference I saw. The Israeli side, it was personality conflicts, and the Palestinian side, it was factional conflicts.
I'm going to make a interject and a highly editorial comment. And I'm signifying and I'm putting the asterisk next to it. There are a lot of people in the tribe, if you want to use President Rivlin's word, the president of the state of Israel, which is usually an honorary job, and head of state for civil functions. Rivlin has talked about 4 different tribes. The tribe that runs things like the Sayeret Matkal and Sayeret Duvdevan, the Israeli commandos, is not particularly interested in the religious Orthodox who actually run in many other parts of the Israeli IDF. There might actually be a lot of national religious in the armored divisions and the Nahal and so on. And they're certainly not interested in the Haredim. So I would not expect Fauda to have much of a storyline which talks about those types of divisions. The storyline that they might have might be internecine fighting within the IDF about who does what. I'm going to use this just as an opportunity to say one more thing about the writers. Actually, not the writers, the creators. The creators of the story were Lior Raz himself, who is the Doron character. Raz was in the Sayeret Duvdevan as a kid, and then lived in America and got hit by the acting bug, went to acting school, has had a lot of roles, including this role and the role in The Kindergarten Teacher and a number of others. But he grew up in Ma'ale Adumim. His father was Iraqi, his mother was Algerian, if I remember. I might have gotten it backwards. He grew up speaking Arabic, not only with them, but with the local kids in his father's business. And his dad was also in the anti-terrorist commando business as a kid. So this is running in a number of generations. Avi Zakharov, the other creator, is a guy who I began to follow reading Haaretz in Hebrew and occasionally in English. Sakharov is the leading reporter on terror for Haaretz, one of the leading left-leaning newspapers in Israel. And also his Arabic is phenomenal, and he has an internal sense as to what the terror commandos are doing. So that also shapes the idea. They're not the writers, at least the writers that I looked at. There was a Noah something or other, a Solomonov or something, who was writing most of the actual episodes. But it is based on those things, and I think that does shape the attitudes. So I'm going to open it up again. Any other comments people have they want to discuss? Jessica, did you see the film? Do you have any ideas? Yeah.
I do. So I originally started this a couple weeks ago so I could pace myself out, and ended up binging it all in like 6 days.
Right.
One of the things that really tore me internally was also the disparity between the ideology and the chain of command on both sides. Whether it's Doron and Gabby, who are, arguing at certain points saying, you know what, you promised me immunity for Bashar, but now that, we have the death of the anti-Palestinian terrorism captain, Gabby lets his emotions also get involved with that, and it influences his ideas of how the situation should go. So they're always following their chain of command, and it was just interesting to see kind of, the play of the people's feelings and opinions of who are in the field and those who remain in the home office. And that happens a couple times throughout all 3 seasons, and I really enjoyed that, especially with Moreno in season 1, season 2 as well.
Zainab, do you have anything you want to share with us? Unmute, please.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I got my answer, and I really like to see what you guys think about the story, because as you mentioned, it was produced in Israeli TV, and I was really wondering to see what people think about it. Because at first glance, it seems to me that perhaps it is anti-Palestinian movie, but yeah, it seems that other people have different impression about it. It's interesting that the way those things that you guys mentioned.
Okay. Vicky, Linda, Mimi, do you have things you want to say?
I
Vicky.
just unmuted myself because I was thinking about 2 things. One, I was thinking, first of all, I watched the first season and I watched 3 episodes, and then I said, oh my God, I cannot do this. And I stopped. And that was, oh gosh, about a month ago. And then the last 2 days, I watched the first 3 episodes of season 3. And actually, I'm hooked. I'm sorry that there was a spoiler, because I was kind of like thinking, oh, I've got to find out what happens. But I will watch it anyway. I mean, I sort of think that it's good. It's good theater, I think that the characters are developed well. I think that there's a lot of action, certainly. The violence, I mean, I wish they had cut some of it down, but probably wouldn't be as effective if it wasn't as violent. Given that I don't know a lot about Israeli life and about current situations in Israel, I really appreciate everybody's comments, because they're innuendos, of what's going on that I'm learning from listening. I thought that one of the things that I did like, though, was the humanization of both sides. There were people in there that were they were struggling. They were just struggling. They were very human. And whether it was the father who was just released from prison, he wanted to go straight. He did not want any, and God forbid he didn't want his son involved in that whole thing. The dilemmas that are just very, they're very real. And I thought that the mothers, the female roles, were interesting to me, how they were presented too, with the dilemma of listening to what the men were doing and how violent they were, and then being so worried for their families and their sons. So it was I thought it was very real in terms of that it wasn't necessarily just that situation or that culture, that it was very much a broad generalization of this is the way people feel when they have, to defend their countries, to take care of their children, to, all of that. So I thought it was good. I would watch the rest of it, even though I know what's going to happen now.
You should watch the rest of it. Daryl or Norma, are you able to add anything to the conversation?
I have some.
Good.
I find the violence difficult to get into, and yet I also think that there's an introspection part of this that was really interesting to me. I've seen it with Stitzel too. We're watching Stitzel. And I wonder what commentary this makes on the larger Israeli society and what changes are going on within the larger Israeli society that this is helping them process something.
Okay. Daryl and Norma, I saw you unmute. I'm going to give you a chance to participate.
Yeah, this is Daryl. Hey, I was listening to a lot of the stuff we were talking about. I know someone was mentioning earlier about the violence at how the guy was violent. That main character was really violent and things. Reminded me of a friend of mine that was an undercover policeman, and and I knew him very well. Because we went to high school together and things. And one thing I observed about his life and stuff is that he had to do some really pretty heavy duty things and stuff because he worked a division that dealt with gangs and drugs and stuff like that. So talking with him, he was the most pleasant person in the world that you sit down talking to him. He treated his family real well, stuff like that. But I knew that when he had to go out and work, he had to change the way that he lived and stuff and the way that he acted, when he was working and things. So I kind of understood that when I listened to that. I listened to the part about the violence and things, and it's interesting because those guys they actually almost live in two worlds. It's really kind of interesting to watch that dynamic with them. And how they live that way. But I kind of understood that way. And I was looking at it, I looked at it, I thought the guy was kind of, he was a violent person, but the thing about it is he was just good at his job. You know what I mean? So, but I thought it was a great series. I didn't look at the whole thing. I only got a chance to look at like a couple of episodes in the beginning and things, but it just reminded me of some of those things that I kind of experienced in life and stuff a long time ago. So.
Zainab has something, and I want to speak to some issues that Beth is raising. Zainab.
Just a short point. We saw that in both cases, people were showing some humane action. They were taking care of their children, and they were also showing some brutal behaviors. And but do you think that is enough to judge that the director, the movie maker, was fair-minded, or perhaps was the movie maker was biased in one aspect as opposed to the other aspect? My point is that just showing that, for instance, those people were representing some human features was not enough to judge that the movie director has the right to be neutral to both sides. Just came to my mind.
Okay, Beth's question has to do with whether or not the film basically gave away intelligence secrets, or whether there are operational considerations. I actually think that the operational considerations might even be more important there. Do you have insiders writing about the Duvdevanim? You have insiders writing about Israeli intelligence. Do you think that there is a danger in terms of giving operational information, either specifics or how these things operate? That's Beth's question. I hope, Beth, I'm being fair to your question. I don't see a lot of response. So, Beth, I know that you prefer to chat.
We need an Israeli person with a military background to answer that.
Yeah, this is what Shimon gave the answer. You got guys with strong military background who are writing this thing, and you might very well feel that this is giving away some operational information that somebody might be able to use. On the other hand, I suspect these guys are extremely careful. They don't want to have anybody killed as a result of what they actually do. It's just enough different. Beth asked earlier, what about, showing things like the Israel Prize and whatnot? A lot of that stuff, Israel is a very open society. You can read about the Duvdevan unit on Wikipedia.
Right.
And you can read about many of these things in great detail. So I don't know that there was much more that was given away. Jessica has a comment.
I watched an interview recently with the Zion organization. They brought Ala Daka on to talk about season 3, and that was a concern that he said the writers really struggled with season 3. Seasons 1 and 2, he said, felt like they were buffed and padded enough, but season 3 went through many rewrites just because they were so concerned about this one story that they were telling and having it, because it was so, just with all the elements in it, people in Israel knew that this had been happening at the time. People in Gaza knew this was happening at the time. And they didn't want to completely narrate all of the intelligence all the way through. And he said that one was quite a struggle for the writers.
There's another aspect to it, and that is Israel does have censorship when it comes to military things getting out. And this is shown on Israeli television before it gets sent out to Netflix and other places in the world. I am sure that it goes through a military censorship to make sure that there's nothing in it that's dangerous. I can't imagine that it wouldn't.
Right, I agree.
Jessica raised an important point. However, I'm going to double down on it. The storyline in season 3 is a storyline that is very much on people's minds. Those terror tunnels, they discover them all the time. And this story had somebody actually escape from a terror tunnel without being found. This is very explosive stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the turning of people who are not really interested in being terrorists to become terrorists, and how that's done is both a literary motif but also a real life motif. Certainly a lot of the films talk about how Arabs become terrorists, try to make the argument that the terrorists really don't know what they're doing, but they become terrorists because of what happens to them. And that part of the storyline also is a very raw nerve among Israelis, and probably Palestinians are saying, yeah, that's exactly right. My brother didn't want to be a terrorist until they got his dad and his uncle and his father and his cousin. And that's why he did it. And again, they're seeing this thing represented. I have only 1 or 2 minutes for a question that was raised very briefly that my students invariably asked. A few people talked about the women very briefly. Some of my students were worried about the representation of women in films. Do women have roles in which they talk about anything other than saving the men in their lives? Vicki, you're smiling. Jessica, you're smiling. I just want to have a few seconds. This is a very much a man's film. There are a few very important women, some of whom have wonderful roles. But anybody have any comments?
No.
Vicki, I see you smiling. Do you want to say anything, or are you just smiling, say, yeah, it's an issue and I don't want to talk about it?
No, I mean, I think it is interesting, but I figure I don't know if I can really talk about it because I didn't see the rest of season 3. But the one woman that appeared to be, at the home office, and she was leading some of the stuff and making some decisions and all of that. So I don't know where that led, but she had a role that was different than the wife or the mother of, a terrorist. So I was curious about if she was going to be given a little bit more leeway in terms of her behavior.
Well,
Charlotte.
I thought it was so violent that most women wouldn't want to be in that business. they would
Okay,
reject.
Wendy, then now Charlene still wants to say something. Let's give her a chance.
Well, I just wondered how connected the roles of women are to the notion or the theme of honor, which seems to thread through these narratives of, and it's a very patriarchal concept, conception of honor that rather excludes the women, who for a more maternal concept of honor, somebody doesn't have to die.
Well, talking about honor in Arab societies is beyond the scope of what I want to do here. Of course, honor is an area in which you could look at as being patriarchal, overarching, and therefore the women die. You could also, again, I have students who try to have a counter narrative, and I think it's not necessarily right, but it's worth listening since these students are women. We say that this is how women exercise power and agency in those societies, because ultimately the entire family's honor is dependent upon the women. And that gives them tremendous agency. It also gets them killed, but it also gives them agency. And the women do the killing because they realize how important honor is to the family. I don't want to get into it because I don't think it plays any role in the series. If people have seen more episodes than me, I don't think there's a single honor killing in the
No,
series.
I was thinking about in episode 3, where Abu Muhammad comes in and tells Bashir's father that Bashir is going to have to do what he wants him to do because the family's honor depends upon it. And so, and his father says, well, he'll be killed. And he said, well, this is the world we live in. And, it's very much this kind of, it's like a duel. It's like the end of Hamilton. I'm teaching Pudd'nhead Wilson in a few weeks. It's it's like the duel in Twain. This is this goes beyond a specific culture.
Although this is very much a motif, literary speaking, not only in Twain and in Hamilton, but in the way that people tell the story of Islamist terror. You have some people who are very much politically involved and very committed. There are others who become committed to Islamist terror only because of honor issues to their family. And again, I don't know how much let's put it this way. A lot of it has to do with family values and family commitments, but I also think there's a literary motif going on here. Jessica's about to say something.
I just wanted to speak to the effect that while some of those roles, some of the female roles did seem slightly understated in other aspects, it did also leave for a very powerful, silent, unspoken understanding that they are the ones, while the husband was away in prison for 20 years, they're the ones that have kept the family. Their strength has provided for her son, for her daughter to be raised to adults. And even though they have their own powerful influence over things. So even though it was understated, for me, that narrative really came through.
Okay, folks, I have to spend a few minutes now. I hope you'll stay with me just to talk about what we do at the end of a series, both in the world of the nonprofit, the Colorado Hebrew Chorale, and in the world of the university. First of all, I'm going to share the screen, and then I'm going to send something in the chat, and I will send you all an email as well. So the Hebrew Chorale has supported this. It's basically been a contribution on my part, and you can go to the thing. I'm going to make a slide. Actually, Carol, do you want to make a pitch? Keep it short. And I will move the website around. Carol, are you able to make a pitch?
Well, you see me with my mouth open over there. this is what we need to think about. All of us who have a commitment to cultural expression of all times, this is a wonderful time to step up and support it. That things are, I hate the word, but it's so true, pivoted to a new reality. It is what it is. And as we all go ahead and find ways to have meaningful cultural connections in our lives and in understanding one community to another, music is the way that we build a bridge. We hope that you will join us next, join Leah Pier's Fabulous Fiery Females. Her next rendition will be this coming Thursday evening. Chava Alberstein, who she's taking into 2 separate sessions. That's how much you could talk about Chava. And a third person, Esther Ofarim, also in August. And the L'Chaim series. And yes, we would love to be singing, but in the meantime, we'll find other ways to make the music work. Now I'm done.
Thank you very much. There is a donate, please give on the Hebrew Chorale website, a word for our sponsor. And I'm going to go to, let me find it here. Come on. Document 1. There we go. I'm going to send you a link that should send you right to it in case you want. Carol and I talked about the fact that we really ought to do, text to donate. But I think doing it by chat and sending you the links is going to be the most effective way. So let me make this to everyone. Everyone in meeting, type message here. This should send you directly to the donate page. You don't have to, it's just the right thing to do if you want. I'm also going to send you the link for L'Chaim, which we mentioned. And you should take the opportunity now to copy these links and act on them if you want. And then finally, I'm going to send you the link for an assessment form, which Charlene teaches in university, and this is one of these necessary evils. There we go. So here's the JOT form. I'm going to send that also. And I will send all of these to you, but we'll spend some moments talking about it. Here we go. Okay, and now I'm going to open it up. So can you see the event feedback form? Maybe not. Share screen.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so here is the event feedback form. Zip code and the number of sessions, very helpful. Just, this is the SCFD for the people in Colorado. And the zip code is especially useful if you're in Colorado, the county in Wyoming, otherwise the state or the country. And how did you hear about this event? Facebook, direct email, SIIS, word of mouth, whatever. What did you find most useful, or I just used a boilerplate for most of this. What did you guys find most useful or enjoyable? Anybody want to spend a moment telling us about that? Some of us, like Charlene, only did 1 session. Some of us have done 9 sessions over the past 2 months. Don't all volunteer at once.
I gotta get out of this now. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I can't get to the screen.
Me either. I'm having trouble.
Well, I can say something, and I've only attended 2, but right away, what I really thought was very useful was the contributions of the participants and the different perspectives that were shared. I thought was very enriching and certainly helped me in processing the viewing that I did prior to the session.
Okay, Shimon, I hope you write this up when you get a chance. What parts did you find the least useful or enjoyable? Are you able to see the form? Should I just dump the form?
I can see the form, but I can't get back to you. For some reason or other.
I can't either.
Okay, so
Why
what
don't you send it to us?
I am going to send it to you once we're done. I sent you the link already
Yes.
by chat,
Right.
and I'm going to send it by email tonight. You know, Barb, I know that Morgan, I'm going to refer to your age cohort. There are people in Morgan's age cohort who can multitask you may not be able to do this, but you know, they can use their cell phones behind their back while doing 3 different things all at once.
Right.
Exactly.
Now she's saying she can't do that, but you know, that's the idea, that some teenagers or, you know, young 20-somethings can do 10 different things at once without getting confused.
Right.
I'm going to need to actually concentrate on sending the email. I can't send it out and run the discussion at the same time. So I'm going to go back to the question. What parts did you find least useful or enjoyable?
Least useful.
I enjoyed it all. You know,
Me
what I got to
too,
see. I mean,
so-
there were unusual films. They were not films that I would have normally seen.
Okay, write those
Same.
things on the. I don't know whether this assessment is going to be good for anybody, but you know, we have to do it. And I don't know we have to do it, but it's actually going to be useful to me to have an assessment in my records.
I would
Right.
say the only problem I had, you know, like getting last week, the kindergarten teacher, you know, I went through the library, but I had to sign up through Canopy, and now I'm getting bombarded by Canopy and all the emails from them and that kind of stuff that I don't need extra.
Well, yeah, you can do whatever you want with that. Comments
You know.
and recommendations. Anybody have any comments or recommendations?
I think you should do it again. This is good.
That's what my students said. We had a lot of fun doing this. Folks, I have classes. Charlene, I know, is teaching in what, 4 weeks?
Yes.
And Morgan is a student in 4 weeks. And Jessica, are you going for an advanced degree? And Mimi is starting. I have to get my syllabus in order. I have to make sure I know what books I'm using and when. And I just, you know, and then there are all both the family and, believe it or not, professional commitments. They're the encyclopedia article and the book review and the 2 essays that I was going to write over the summer that, you know, could happen by the end of August, but they didn't happen because I was preparing films. Believe me, a lot more fun than some of this other stuff that I'm doing.
Good distraction. Are you going online, or are you going to be meeting?
I am teaching entirely by Zoom. I'm looking forward to meeting Morgan in person somehow. I'm not quite sure how that's going to happen, but I'll probably travel to the university for a couple of times. I told my Laramie landlady, assume that I'll be in Laramie at least 4 times, sometimes overnight, but I'm going to do the actual teaching by Zoom, in part because I think that that's safer. I also have this nightmare scenario that we're going to go on hybrid, and then within a week, the university is going to shut down everything. Jessica, what is your university doing?
The university I'm going to, depending on your area, it will be entirely online or hybrid. The university, however, I work for went fully online as of Wednesday.
Where are you going?
New England Conservatory in Boston, but I work for Berklee College of Music.
Charlene, what's Drury doing?
Yeah. So jury's seated. We have really rigorous protocols for safety with flow charts and required masking. Students will be living individually in the dorms. They won't have roommates. And So we've got a quite rigorous safety protocol, but we're going seated. Many classrooms gathering outside.
Which is
Okay.
fine when the weather's nice.
Yeah, right. And we have mosquitoes. Yeah, we have mosquitoes here in Missouri. So.
Zainab, what are they doing at your college? Are you still taking classes or are you just writing?
Both of them, because I have to teach my own class as a solo instructor, and it's entirely online, thankfully. But the class that I am enrolling is in person. They have other universities that some classes are online, some classes are in person. It depends upon you. For instance, I myself decided to teach online.
Yeah, I made the same decision in part because of what the university sent me. Morgan, do you have any idea as to how many of your classes are going to be in person?
I tried to move some things around today, but as of yesterday, it was 4 out of 5.
In person?
No, online.
Online.
At Wyoming?
Yeah.
Wyoming.
Only my freshman seminar is in person.
Yeah, they want to keep those in person as much as possible. So, there it is. Well, I hope you've seen that we can have reasonable discussions via Zoom.
Absolutely.
Anybody else want to offer anything about Zoom versus in person? And I'm going to go on to the next question if not.
I was going to just offer a suggestion.
Yes.
That if you are going to be too busy, there's some very smart people in this group, and maybe one of them would like to take over and continue the process.
Email me if you're interested in volunteering. It is not as easy as you think.
I'm sure it isn't. I'm sure it isn't.
And, I actually have to say that over time, I've developed a number of things which I hope, well, let's this way. It makes it better than the first couple of weeks of Zoom only teaching were back in March. And there you go.
There's a certain skill to it. I mean, when they first started having open universities or online universities, there were whole protocols that you had to be trained to how to teach a class like that, how to prepare the class like that. Now it's become more routine, but in the beginning it was very hard. My daughter teaches high school in Israel, but she also teaches students in the States, like a small group, small classes. So she has the experience of teaching these classes online. When they switched in Israel and they switched over, almost overnight, saying, okay, now we're not going back to school, we have to start teaching online. The teachers were all coming to her and saying, what do you do? How do you do this? And she did some in-service tutorials for them online to train them as to how to take curriculum they've already been using and developed and apply it. And it worked very well in the high school. It worked okay in the middle school, the elementary school, really, especially the younger grades.
Yeah, elementary school.
Did not, she teaches middle and high, and she teaches honors English, but she said her colleagues who were teaching in the elementary divisions and her own daughter who was 6th grade and very computer literate, so she was okay. But the younger children, they can't sit. They can't sit unless the parents are going to give them that attention of homeschooling. Most of the parents are working, so their work transferred to online, but they're working. They're not there to be teachers for their kids. And, but I think at the college level, most people have at least basic computer skills that they can adapt to it. I think it's more that they have to be committed. If it's a class where they have to show up, it's one thing, but if it's, doing seminars or whatever that you can listen to a recording, they have to be committed to really do the work.
Well, I will add one or two very brief comments, and then we'll go on to a summary of what you're going to see in the email from there on. Mimi actually was in many of my classes. Did you feel that the online Zoom presentation was reasonable? Do you have any comments about, at least what I was doing?
Well, yeah, but one of the things that really helped is that before the whole pandemic thing hit, you were always already recording classes and giving us the link so we could go back and review. And that made a big difference, I think, for me anyway.
Okay, so, there it is. And you can go back to review. All of us, Charlotte and Zainab are teachers. Jessica, will you be doing any teaching as part of your conservatory, or are you just studying?
I begged off because I'm supposed to be doing my defense, and I don't know if that's on Zoom or not, so I wanted a little bit of freedom, so I'm not this semester.
So, these are all important things, and we're all learning. And I think one of the positive things that we will look back on, I hope, on this period of time is that it was a pain in the butt, but we also tried hard to be culturally productive and educationally honest as much as possible, given basically the pain in the butt situation.
Well, Seth, very realistically, we would not have had access to a class like this.
No, that's right.
I mean, I'm not at the University of Wyoming. I'm at home, and
Right. So I say this is we'll look back
wonderful.
and say necessity was or aggravation was the mother of tremendous invention. And I've seen this. My inbox is filled almost every other day. Lori Barron from San Diego is sending me a list of dozens of lectures that are phenomenally interesting. My wife, Carol, has gone to the ACDA, and that's the choral directors and Chorus America and the Cantors Assembly, and talk about whether or not we should sing songs by he whose name cannot be mentioned,
yes, right.
student of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who went with a guitar, and whose daughter, whose name should be mentioned, Neshama Karbach, was in on the conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And, just every time you turn around, fascinating material. Matthew Lazar is giving conversations with some of the greatest people in Israeli music every week. I'm not going to say Lahavdil. Leah Peer is giving conversations with some of the greatest women in Israeli singing every week. Just phenomenal programming. Some people in the music field, I don't know what Jessica will say. Some people in the music field will say, oh, that's very nice, but it's not quite the same thing as going to a piano and violin performance of the first four Beethoven sonatas, which Carol and I did yesterday. Live music is quite different from, Zooming conversations.
And yet, but you're applying this to so many different fields. I'm a scientist by training and a medical writer, and I'm attending the International Conference on Alzheimer's Disease, which I'm an activist in the organization, community educator is what they call it. And I would never be able to go. The meeting would have been in Amsterdam. I mean, it's not something that I would ever have had access to financially or anything else, and they're offering it free. So,
That's
we
good.
can go to as many sessions as I wish to go to. All I had to do was sign up. And it's really very, very interesting because it's really, telling me that I still have the mind to be able to understand the science. And what I do is I communicate that science down to a level that non-scientists can understand. But it's really been very productive.
Well, since you mentioned the word free, this particular program had very little actual cash outlay. However, it is part of an attempt on my part and on the part of the Hebrew Chorale to create COVID programming, and sooner or later that does generate costs. So, think about whether or not you can be generous. The rest of the questionnaire that you're going to get will ask you to think about your favorite film, your least favorite film, the best actor, best actress award. In my classroom, I call these things the Tories, after the Emmys or the Oscars or whatnot. Bob Torrey was a colleague of mine who was substantially older, but died much too young. He and my colleague, Paul Flesher, used to teach a film and religion course. And so I named the classroom awards after him. We're not going to do the full-fledged thing that I do with my classes with nominations and whatnot, but I would be interested in hearing from you about your favorite scene and your favorite film and your least favorite film and stuff like that. And I ask my students to make up an award every time. That's not yet in the questionnaire, but it will be when you get it by email. So make up an award or two. One year they had the most gut-wrenching scene was the award that they wanted to give. And I've had other like crazy ones, like the stupidest character or something like that. But so there you go. Finally, let's see, Donna, you started off today by saying you had a glass of something. So let's all, those of us who have glasses, let's raise a toast to all of us and hope that we have a great and phenomenal rest of the summer. For those of you who are interested, again, I'll tell you there's the Fiery Females and the Tel Aviv. I'm doing a program for Tisha B'Av, the Jewish festival, which recalls the destruction of the Second Temple and the First Temple on Thursday afternoon. You'll probably get an email from me about that as well. It's a kind of hodgepodge. Shimon apparently will be singing a melody by Cherubini from the, and it's actually a round. So we'll see how that works out. But I'll do stuff from the evening, the morning, and the afternoon service, and I'll talk a little bit about genocides and about some other issues, and the necessity to protest, which is actually a passage from the Babylonian Talmud, which I think is even more poignant than it was a couple of years ago when I began including it in this service. So I'll send you all that stuff by email. I had a great time doing this, and thanks for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
And
Ward.
stay well, everybody. Just
Thank
stay
you
well.
all.
Stay strong and stay safe and sane. If anybody wants to contact me or talk to me about any of the films or anything else, I'll be thrilled. I'll make time for you. I've made time for all sorts of people. Charlotte, I'm thrilled to meet an SIIS person from a whole decade later than me. And would love to hear more about your particular SIIS is a program at Brandeis University, funded by the Schusterman family, which if people are in Jewish studies will know that this is a very prominent family. And if you come from Kansas, they're a well-known family. There you go. Okay, have a good one, everybody.
Shalom, Dr. Ward. Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.